was 7 reviews. It went down to like 35, 40 next day.
Yeah, the front came through.
Yeah, really scary stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, that's parents.
R2's,
I got your thing.
heard Allie's Joppa came in.
Yeah.
It was good. I heard anything else.
Moving Ava, which I guess is good.
Yeah, right.
Hopefully it can remain relatively calm and she can do the basics. Not a lot.
Yeah, you know,
She's got to get that degree.
right.
Yeah, it's a tough thing they're going through, you know.
Right, Glenn, I'm sorry.
Tough stress.
I can't even.
Move things along tonight, right?
You think so?
I don't know. The one more thing fell off the agenda. Oh, the signal agreement fell off the agenda too. So.
Okay, good.
Sorry for the tight space. We're still trying to keep our social distancing. Thank you very much.
Boy, they look impressive, don't they?
Live? We're going to wait till 6:30. Okay. According to AT&T and Verizon, it is 6:30, so.
It is 6:30 on Monday, December the 13th, and we're here for the monthly meeting of the Mayor and City Council. Thank you all for coming out this evening. If I could ask you to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Keeping in mind the folks in Tennessee who had suffered so greatly over the weekend, please. Thank you. Please be seated. Again, welcome to our monthly meeting, and we're happy to have you all here tonight. And of course, we wish you all the most happy of holiday seasons, and hope you and your family will enjoy a very healthy and prosperous new year. Along those lines, keeping things going, I would advise you that the city and the BPW will close their offices at noon on the 23rd, which is Thursday, and they will be closed on Friday, Christmas Eve, and will reopen on Monday, the 27th. And then the city will be open on New Year's Eve. And Thursday, on the 30th, we'll be open, but then again closed on the 31st, and we'll then reopen on the 3rd. Just a quick update on a few things that are going on around town. The Savannah Road work continues. I know there's been temporary closures of lanes as we've gone along there. I appreciate everybody's patience with that work. That is replacing water lines to houses and getting some lead and iron services out of service and getting it replaced with new leads to those homes. Also, I know that a couple of weeks ago, on December the 1st, we had a great deal of interest about the moving of the swing bridge People are having parties and all kinds of things about the swing bridge, and it's the move that didn't happen. But for a variety of reasons, and it gives you some idea of what's going on with engineering and how important it is to have accurate engineering. But we have been advised that later this week, DelDOT does plan to have an announcement about when the move will actually transpire, and I would suspect it won't be too long. And we're all looking forward to it being on the other side of the canal, over at the end of American Legion Drive. So stay tuned. I'm sure the Cape Gazette and probably all the local media will be advising you when the actual bridge is going to be moved. I'd also like to just comment for a moment about Lewis Lights. It's a positive experience for this community and the surrounding area, but I would caution you to be that we are concerned about public safety, and there's a lot more traffic at night, and the deer and other animals are moving around. So I would encourage you to be cautious as you're crossing the street and moving about. And then in terms of our agenda, we're going to be moving item I-8, which is the police study on staffing, up to right after we have our public service, our annual employee service awards. And then on item I-5, which is the signal agreement between Old Town at White's Pond, that will be coming off the agenda this evening. The agreement is not quite ready for signing, so we'll be taking that off the agenda. That's all I have in the way of, I have one other thing I want to share with you. You may know that we participate in the DFIT, which is the Delaware Founders Insurance Trust for our workers' compensation. And they provide a snowplow rodeo every year, and which sounds funny, but it's held at Dover Downs, and it teaches men and women who work in our streets department how to operate equipment in snowstorms and other inclement weather. And I'm pleased to advise you that in the commercial driver's license division, Chris Cheney of our streets department won first place, and Kenny Morris placed third. So I think we had a good team. Anne-Marie and El Lorraine were both there. And I don't know if you want to comment about snowplow rodeo. It's kind of an obstacle course, isn't it?
It is. It's a very challenging course that the participants go through, but it does test a lot of maneuvers that they will need to utilize when this time comes.
Great. So we thank our team of men and women who went up to participate in it, and very proud of those who did succeed in winning prizes. So moving then, unless there's any other additions or deletions at the table, we can then move on to item E1, which is presentation and recognition of the Cape Henlopen High School ROTC for their participation in the National Junior Leadership Academic Bowl. Sergeant Hurt and Colonel Riley are here to talk with us. Tell us a little bit about the program, and we thank the students for being here today. The ROTC students are highly visible in this community, and we see them at all of our ceremonies, doing our flag ceremony and everything, and we do appreciate it. And we wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity to recognize their achievement here in an academic status, because we so frequently see them in their soldier role, but it's also important to know that their academic achievement is rising to this occasion.
Carl, well, thank you. Members of the City Council, Mayor, citizens, thank you very much for letting us present these young men and women this evening. And they've worked hard to get to where they got. And once again, we have a second team, which is competing right now. And we'll see how they make out come second semester. Right now, they're doing very well. And some of them who are here are members of that team again. Rather than me say any further, Sergeant Hurt was the coach of the team. He shepherded them through all of the competitions, took them to Washington, D.C. He shepherded and he took care of them right there, and they competed every day when they were there. I don't know how many days it was. Was it 3?
It's a week.
4? Anyway, I was not there for it, okay? I got information about it as it came in. Therefore, he is the individual who's most knowledgeable about what they did while they were there. I am not the most knowledgeable. Therefore, I turn over the microphone to Sergeant Hurt. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sergeant Hurt, the floor is yours. Tell us
All
about
right, it's relatively simple to explain how great my kids have been doing over the last several years. 7 out of the last 9 years, we have made it to Washington, D.C. to the Nationals. We're the only school in the entire state that's ever made it to Washington, D.C. No one really knows that, but we're representing Lewis and Cape and Henlopen High School, and we always do really well. The bottom line is we start off with like 3,600 schools, goes from the first level to the second level to the very last level. There's only 24 remaining. And most schools only have one team attending. We normally have our academic team and our leadership team appearing at this championship. So it's no small feat when you're talking about representing the top 1% in the nation in academics and leadership as well. I just want to make sure these guys have a floor where they get recognized, because they're supposed to have already had an award presentation, but it didn't happen. So the mayor was so gracious to let us come down here and have our superheroes get represented where everybody can see us down here. That way they know for a fact what we're doing and what we're going to continue to do. We just got great news today that we just made it to the second round for our first. So we took a little hand up for these guys. The scores were pretty good, but not where I like them to be. However, they know I'm just one of those guys that keep push, because you have to be really hard to get to where you got to get at. And the bottom line is it's really hard for these kids, because after they be in math, English, and science and everything else, then I'm beating them up with some more math, English, and science at the end of the day. So most kids like, well, I don't want to do this. But now these kids has had the feeling of what it feels like to go to Washington, D.C. to compete against the best schools in the entire nation. I'm talking about schools that come from Hawaii, California, Texas, and then here we are, Lewis, Delaware. Where's that at? I said, you guys know who we are now because we've been there 7 out of the last 9 years. So trust and believe. They know who we are, and we'll be back again this year. But I just want to have the time, the mayor has a few minutes to just recognize these guys, give a couple certificates, so that way you can identify the face with the names of the personnel to get it. So Mayor, would be so kind to come up. I appreciate it.
I'm getting ready to go.
Okay, so it is with great pleasure that I recognize the students here, and I really do appreciate your taking time to come out. Okay, and so the first person I'd like to recognize is Zoe Peters. Zoe. Zoe was part of the academic team, and that's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, she's one of my smart ones.
You're smartest.
There you go.
Second person we'd like to recognize is Kathy Drumheller. Kathy? Congratulations. And then we have Jose Chavez. As part of the leadership team. Thank you very much. And then Christian Fusarella. Is that correct? And I bet that's his sister, is that correct? Yes. And that's Isabella.
Yeah, I know it is.
Finally, last but not least, we have Isaac Lee. Congratulations and thank you for what you do for this community and what you're doing for your own education. We look forward to seeing where this all leads for you in the future. Thank you.
Mayor, can we get a group shot?
Sure, come on up. You want to Katie? All right.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the team captain is not here tonight. She's up.
She decided to take a vacation in Florida. Yeah, she's not on mine.
All right. Why she sees it.
Did your brother, Brett, is he that?
One more, sir. Just give me a second.
Okay, we're good.
One more. Just give me a second.
Go ahead,
Thank
one
you.
more go.
Give me the Kool-Aid smile, guys. Come on. All righty then. Great.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. And have a great holiday. And thanks to all the parents who came tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you. Okay.
Everyone have a Merry Christmas and a very happy New Year. Good holidays.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks for all you guys did.
Yep. Thank you.
You're welcome to stay.
You're welcome to stay, but we won't be offended if you...
Class dismissed.
That would be nice. Phone, I'm surprised, like, what happened to your phone?
Okay. Now we have room for everybody who's sitting in. Go on in.
Say, great news, move forward.
Superheroes move forward?
Thank you. Have a good holiday. All right, so I think we can move ahead now to item E2, and we have presentation of possible action on an appointment of to the Planning Commission to fill the unexpired term of Sumner Crosby. Sumner has served the Planning Commission for several years, and he is asked to step down from that position, and I would like to put forth the name of Rich Innes for consideration of council to fill that position. He'll be filling the unexpired term of Sumner. We have a motion.
I make a motion.
Thank you, Carolyn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jim. Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item E3 is presentation and possible action on the appointment of a member of the Mayor and City Council to serve on the Joint Site Development Review Committee. I have served on that committee since it was formed, and would be happy to continue to serve in that position if it's the pleasure of council.
I'll make a motion for the mayor to continue in his role as chairing or as a member, I should say, of the Joint Site Development Review Committee.
I'll second that.
The motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Look forward to doing that. I think the development of this Joint Site Development Committee has been a good thing for the city. It enables the Planning Commission and the council or some representative of the council and H-Park to come together and look things over simultaneously. It actually is a time-saving effort, and I think gets a better coordinated effort, so thank you. And moving on to item E4 is presentation of possible action on the appointment of the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee to fill the expired term of Donald Long and Robert Fisher. Don Long, who served as the chair for several years, has asked to step down, and I thank him, and I know council joins me in thanking him for his service. Our Bike Ped Committee is very, very important, and probably as the trails continue to develop will become even more important in terms of bicycle safety. And as I've said to members of council and to both members who have served on the committee, and I know Chip's here tonight. Chip, thank you for your service. As we're working with a 10-foot wide path that is a multimodal path. So you have everything from baby carriages and wheelchairs to bicyclists who are used to riding 50 miles a day, trying to use a 10-foot wide strip. And it requires a lot of action. And I thank both Tim and Andrew for their work as council and liaisons to this committee for your efforts. So Robert Fisher has agreed to continue to serve on the committee. And I would like to also ask council to consider appointing Glenn Doddington. Mr. Doddington is a recreational biker. He's expressed interest in coming on board and helping the city, and he thought the bicycle area would be good. I think Tim had his chance to speak with him, and so I would ask council's approval or recommendation of the approval of Mr. Doddington and Robert Fisher.
I'll make a motion that is it a reappointment of Robert Fisher and an appointment of Glenn Dunnington to the Lewis Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
Is there a second? Thank you, Carolyn. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Then item E5 is a presentation of annual employee service awards. This is an activity that would normally occur at a citywide luncheon at Christmas. And due to COVID, we didn't have one last year, and due to COVID, we're not having one this year. So it's always important to recognize, and we have a wonderful collection of employees who have served long for the city's benefit. And every year we try to recognize those who have achieved a particular milestone. And this year, while most of them are not here, we have a couple who are. I'd like to acknowledge the following people who have achieved a milestone of varying years. First of all, for 5 years, we have Steve Burrows, who is in our building department, and he is the assistant building official. He has served 5 years. And so this is an award for him. Not only is it a certificate, but it also does come with a cash contribution to them. So a little something extra for the holiday. And then second, also serving for 5 years, and this person is here, is our very own Chief Spell. So Chief Spell.
Yeah.
Hard to believe 5 years. Huh? Okay, and then also achieving a tenure status is Chris Cheney. The man I just referred to is who had won an award at the Snowplow Rodeo. He's been with us 10 years, and so we thank Chris for his work in our maintenance department, in our streets department. And then Sergeant James Locklear also has achieved a 10-year service record with the city. And again, we thank Sergeant Locklear for his service. And then it's with great pleasure that I recognize Ellen Lorraine McCabe for 15 years of service. And finally, last but not least, somebody that's probably known to everyone because he's out and about every day, is Rick Melendez. Rick Melendez is in charge of our maintenance department, and he has been with the city for 20 years this year. So we really So with that, I'm sorry we can't have a luncheon, but we certainly do appreciate it. I think the city turnover is one of the things that really costs the city a lot of money, and we're very well served by having such long-term serving personnel. So we thank everyone for their service. Thank you. Then, as I indicated, we'd like to move item I-8 up to the front of the table here. And this is a consideration by Mayor and Council for going ahead with a Policeman Study Award. Policeman Study, and I would invite Leonard Matarese, if he's here.
He's actually, he's not on the Zoom, but Tom Wieserek is, so we've just promoted him.
Okay.
He had oral surgery today, so I don't know if he'll be able to speak.
Okay.
So we're hoping Leonard would be with us.
So if you're on, sir, we would welcome you to talk to us about this proposal. Right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. And if I slur a few words or whatever, it's not because I'm already in holiday spirit, it's because my mouth is still frozen.
We understand.
I'm Tom Wieserek. I'm the director for the Center for Public Safety Management, and it's a pleasure to meet all of you, at least virtually. Hopefully soon we'll meet in person. But we were asked to submit a proposal and did so on your police department. And as you know, and as the chief knows, who's sitting there, we're in an interesting time with policing. And so hopefully the proposal will guide the city and your department as it moves into the future. And along the way, if there are issues that need to be looked at in more specific detail, we can amend that for the same price. And we look forward to working with you. And I'd like to entertain any questions.
So this will be an analysis of the police services, as I understand it. Correct, sir? And that's correct. A chance to look at the department as a whole. Chief, would you like to comment on it?
No, we obviously welcome the study. Certainly interested in providing, the proper and professional policing to our citizens. So we welcome the professional consultant review. I think it'll be helpful for us in our operation.
Terrific. Thank you.
I guess I have two things. One is, if you could just articulate for the community, what is the ROI your firm brings to a municipality in terms of you're looking at the police department? And then the second part of my question is, this isn't meaning to be offensive, but I assume this is like a boilerplate sort of, these bullet points, or is there an opportunity for us to shape the questions and then come back to us with a more bespoke sort of proposal?
Yes, on the first one, we're a national company that was created by the International City-County Association back almost 16 years ago now. And we bring subject matter experts as well as a data team that are drawn across the country, actually around the world, that will look at your department. First off, we conduct an in-depth data analysis to look at what is the kind of performance of the department as current, and then looking at how does it compare practices, things drawn from around the country, around the world, and then, are there ways that you can get there? Obviously, probably one of the biggest challenges you face is being a coastal community. Your population swells considerably in the summer, and how do you deal with that and the policing challenges? We've done other projects up along the coast all the way up to New Jersey, and that is one of the challenges. We just completed one, matter of fact, down in Myrtle Beach. But the coastal communities face an interesting challenge. At the same time, getting new officers is one of the biggest challenges probably facing policing. As far as delving down, we worked with the city manager to identify these points. But along the way, if there are others that come up, other areas you'd like to see drilled down in, as I mentioned before, we can do that. Same price and looking into that. We will be meeting, or we look forward to at least working with all of the members of the council as well as the administration and the department, gathering the input, gathering information, and again, if there are issues or specific areas, we can adjust accordingly.
I noticed that you did the similar study for Dover, Delaware.
Yes, that's correct.
Was that recently done, sir?
That's been a few years now since we did that one. Without looking it up, I think it's been about 5 years ago now.
Okay.
I think it was 2016 or 17.
Yeah. And you've also done work in Annapolis, Maryland, and Ocean City, Maryland. So your organization is very familiar with the general area of the Eastern Shore, and obviously you're based in D.C., so you're not.
We've done about 425 studies across the United States and Canada, and so we've got experience both coastal as well as tourism, obviously working in the South and the coast. Tourism is a challenge because you have a lot of people coming in at different periods. Myrtle Beach, the most recent one, I know had 6 different population periods that they actually go through a year, ranging from motorcycle enthusiasts up to senior citizens and golf tournaments. So that's probably been the most whiplash I've seen in a community, that trying to police all 6 of those populations, and they're all regularly changing over all across the year.
Very interesting choice of word, whiplash.
Well, there were other words that came, but I was trying to...
Yeah, it's good. I like it.
This holiday season. So.
Because sometimes, as you move through seasons and these things, you do feel like it's a little bit of a whiplash, so thank you. Any other questions for the table before?
I guess this may be a question maybe Tom knows with respect to doing a thorough study. Like, would their group be able to get access to the Delaware State Police and talk about the relationship and the overlap that goes there?
Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty important component is, the mutual aid that we provide and is also provided to us from the state police for sure. Right? And I think that would be something he would probably want to see.
I have a question that might be really obvious to everyone else, and it has not become apparent to me. Can we expect members of your consulting team to actually visit the city and spend time here with? We're not doing this all virtually, correct? The interviewing and so forth?
No, I hope I just didn't cut you off and went digital for a minute on the video feed, but both myself and Dr. O'Connell's in New York and I'm in D.C., we both will be spending time on the ground, as well as the data that's usually collected virtual and analyzed, but we will be planning on spending a number of days in your community as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Is there a motion to move ahead with this? Carol, you have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Well, wait a minute, are we going to have some discussion?
If you want to have some discussion, go ahead.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, what do we, you know, it was a police review committee, so what, again, are we hoping, you know, what are we hoping is the ROI out of this?
So I think that the big thing that we're looking for is, one, they've got the subject area expertise that is important, so they can look at our department, look at the staffing, look at, you know, the national norms, and determine if our staffing level needs to be changed, if our staffing structure needs to be changed, you know, because we have had quite a bit of change in the past few years, so this would...
Organization study.
Right. And look at it, along with that, look at the calls for service.
Right.
To see, you know, where we are. And I think, my sense is that it's going to be more the staffing level that drives the need to have a patrol staff will drive our staffing level more than the calls for service, because we are small. But, you know, they'll be able to make that determination based on empirical evidence.
Yeah, and I would, yeah, I mean, simply, the police review committees were staffed by citizens and members of council. I mean, the difference for me is we have real subject matter experts here who have focused exclusively on public safety issues. And Mr. Resort did answer my original question, was I wanted to make sure that the organization has examined similarly situated communities like ours that tend to be very, you know, population movement is pretty rapid. You know, we're very seasonal in many ways, but have changed. We used to be completely seasonal. Now we're much more year-round in many respects. So I welcome the opportunity. I think it's always great to have a third party come in that's very skilled and knowledgeable to take a fresh look at almost any issue that any organization has in order to give a very independent perspective.
Chief, have you had an opportunity to put input to the bullet points?
Yeah, I think they're substantially
Based on,
the same that they were a few years ago. Is that correct, Emily? Right?
Yes.
I mean, it's all the things that we're looking to get from it.
So you're comfortable with this?
I am, sure.
I think Julio said it well when he said this was the Citizens Review Committee, basically, and with some staff. And this puts a whole professional eye on it, which I think we made some staffing changes based upon, or staffing structure changes based upon the Citizens Review Committee that we had, but did we do that right? And should we maybe consider restructuring that in some other way? So I think this provides us an opportunity to get someone an organization that has a great deal of looking at various sizes of departments and with a fresh eye. So,
and what's here it is, I'm sorry, the deliverable. Is the deliverable something that is able to be consumed by the public?
Yes, the way we usually present our reports, we try and make them readable both by council as well as the public, and then it's up to the council and the local government whether and how they'll release the report. We don't release it, but rather we provide that to you, and then the local government makes the decision. A number of communities posted on their website for the community to look at. You can go to Bozeman, Montana. That's one of the ones we just recently finished a major police and fire study. They posted it on their website and questions, and they're moving through it. I think they have 130 some recommendations there, but they have a number of issues.
I also note that you would be willing to come back and for a fee, obviously, to make a community-wide presentation if we so choose.
That's correct.
Thank you.
I have one question. Given the fact that we've raised the issue of the police study committee, or whatever that was called, Will their recommendations be made available to the consultant in any, as a framework?
I think all of that will be available to them so that they can see kind of what has led to where we are now.
I see.
And, I'm sorry.
Please, no, go ahead.
Well, I just had one other question about the funding of, is it potential that we could use ARPA money to fund this?
I don't believe so, because public safety is not something that is in ARPA, and it's not directly COVID-related either, so I don't think that it is an eligible expense. We did get a question in the Q&A asking the cost for this. So based on the proposal we have, it's $38,500. So.
And how long would it take before we estimate? I forget.
So there's a schedule on page 27 of the proposal. So, we would we'd execute the agreement, do a project launch, which at this point I'm thinking would be after the holiday. And then, when you add it all up, it's about 3 to 4 months, is that?
That's correct.
Right, 3 to 4 months out. Thank you.
So we would have it in advance of summer.
Yes.
We launch it.
Barring any big snowstorms or northeasters coming up the East Coast this winter.
Okay. We'll work on that.
Yeah.
Any other questions or discussion from the table?
Nope.
Any questions from the folks in the audience?
Mayor. Hi. There's actually another question on Zoom.
Okay, you want to read it?
Absolutely. Ellen Brockman asked, can we hear the difference between this proposal and the cheaper option?
We don't have a cheaper option.
About the police proposal for the study. She wants to know if there is a cheaper option or if this is the set price for this proposal.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at with the bespoke, but it sounds like...
No, there's an option here on page 29.
Right, that's
a workload deployment staffing data analysis.
Right, but that wouldn't give us the meaningful, recommendations on staffing structure and all of that.
No, understood. I'm just pointing out that they did provide something.
right.
In terms of a comprehensive study, this is the only one that we have.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, in a sense, I don't want to say that, but she's saying, because there is 2 options, as she reviewed the attachments on the agenda, you guys are suggesting to pick the one you're saying.
Yes.
More comprehensive one.
More comprehensive approach.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, sorry.
Okay.
That's fine.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Tom. Good luck with your dental.
All right, thank you.
Look forward to working with you in January.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to note, in Michigan, one year they encouraged the mayor and the city manager to participate in the snowplow rodeo, but they only did it one time for some reason, and they never invited us back.
Yeah, right.
I'll do it.
Oh, yeah, you would.
I don't have a CDL.
There's a non-CDL category, we're good.
Maybe we should ask the chief of police to participate.
That's fine.
Thank you. Appreciate your being with us tonight.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Happy holidays.
Yeah, to you. Thank you. I think we then can move on to item F, which is the consent agenda, which consists of the mayor and city council meeting minutes from October 14th and November 8th, the Board of Public Works meeting minutes, the financial activity reports, the police department activity report, and the fire department activity report. Is there any one of those items that anyone would like to pull out for separate discussion?
Yes, I would.
Okay, which one?
The October 14th draft minutes.
Okay, we'll hold those out. Is there a motion then to, are there any others?
I did talk with Ellen. I just wanted Ellen to speak briefly on the financial report, just because there was an accounting.
Okay. So let's hold those 2 out. Are there any others? We'll come back to those. Let's get an approval of the consent items. Chief, did you want to make any comments about your report?
Well, I was going to say a few things very quickly, Mayor. First of all, Corporal Jonathan Moyer from the Police Department has graduated from the Delaware State Police Leadership Development course. Pretty intense 3-week-long training. So I want to make note of that. Casey Krapps has been named the department detective. Took over from Moyer, who was promoted to the corporal position. And we have one new hire, Kenneth Huff. He's in training, not yet certified. Expect him to be out probably 30-ish days from now, maybe a little bit longer. But he comes as a pre-certified police officer from the state of Colorado. 10 years in, he was a sergeant at his previous department. Has a lot of good skills that we look forward to using.
That's great. I have had a chance to meet him, and he comes from Arvada, Colorado, which is a community just north of Denver.
Yep.
About 100,000 people, so he'll bring some interesting skills to us, I'm sure.
Chief, is it accurate to say there was no issues at the parade, the night of the parade?
Yeah, the parade went off without a hitch. We had great cooperation from a combination of the police department, the fire police, the maintenance department, and DELDOT obviously contributed to us hardening the route for obvious reasons, and everything worked out nicely.
It was one of the best yet.
Yeah, it was a good parade.
So next year is the 90th, so thank you for all your efforts on that. Okay, so we've held out the financial activity report and the October 4th meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the other items on the agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? All right, let's go to the October 14th minutes. Carolyn?
Yes, on the second page, 6, there was a statement there that needed to be corrected, and I'd like it to read a different way than what it is. It has to do with Councilperson Jones made a comment. I wasn't in that committee meeting, but this is what I'd like to change it to. Councilperson Jones signed the petition in September 2019 expressing concern over the official code development. The way it reads right now is contributed to something, and that connotes a completely different thing.
Yeah, okay, I see it.
I see what you're saying.
So we can, Gail, you can make that correction?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then, do you want to comment on the request about the financial reactivity reports?
Sure. So on the November financial statements on page 1, you're going to see where under the month of November, operating revenue was negative $242,216, and that is because we moved the net of the building permit received for the lodge at Historic Lewis from the general fund to the general capital projects fund. And I say net because we reduced it by the amount of fees that we are going to be paying.
Those are inspection fees.
Correct.
Thank you very much for that clarification. So we have the correction to the minutes and the explanation of the financial security reports. Can we have a motion to approve those two reports with those corrections or notice? Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Then moving on to Anne Marie for your report.
All right, so I forgot to put the PowerPoint on this computer, so you're just going to have to listen to me without the visual aids. So in terms of capital projects and construction, we have the restroom at the Rollins Center is nearing completion. We hope to have it completed. It looks like the very beginning of January at this point. We're going to plan a walkthrough. The BPW project to replace the water line, the water main, line the sewer main, and replace water and sewer services on Pilottown Road continues. They have recently begun the replacement of the water and sewer services The project is expected to be completed by early May. So it's the replacement of the water and sewer services and then repaving of the road that is yet to be completed. The contractor on our Phase 25 street improvements has been working on the curb ramps at Cedar and Savannah Road. This work should be complete in early January. They also extended the pavement on Tennessee Avenue. The last thing they'll need to do is install the actual crosswalks. Site work has begun on Lewis Waterfront Preserve for installation of the site infrastructure, so they are not yet to the point of pulling building permits, but they are doing a lot of earthwork out there, which we expect to continue. The Executive Committee on Resiliency continues to meet twice a month, the second and fourth Tuesday, so they met on the 19th and 23rd of November, really focusing on possible policy solutions to the challenges that we have with climate change and sea level rise. The Subdivision Review Committee, or Subcommittee of the Planning Commission, held a workshop on November 23rd to solicit feedback from the public on revisions to the Subdivision and Land Development Code. We are continuing to accept comments both through the website, and there's a drop box in the lobby of City Hall. And on November 30th, Mayor and City Council and the Planning Commission held a joint session to discuss the scope of work for the 5-year review of the 2015 comprehensive plan, which was adopted in 2017. So that scope is on this evening's agenda. The Board of Health met on November 2nd. Things were looking pretty good at that point in time, pre-Omicron. Their next meeting will be in January. But the good news is Hospitality Night and the Christmas Parade, which were both canceled last year, were held and successful the 29th of November and December 3rd. Building permits, we issued 42 building permits. I think one of them was a new home permit. The rest were renovations of various types. Our trash volume seems to be down a little, up a little bit from last year, same time, but pretty consistent. Our Parks and Rec permits, we in the month of November had 13 bonfire permits. So we continue to issue recreation permits, looks like throughout the year. And we have 6 new rental licenses and 13 new business licenses. I mentioned this snowplow rodeo, which the mayor has already mentioned. The Board of Adjustment, I think everybody knows, met on November 2nd to hear the appeal submitted by the Lewis Historical Society on a determination by the building official that the LHS campus is subject to review by H-Park. The city's position was upheld by the Board of Adjustment, and now we are working on some policy alternatives that would allow us to better address museums as they relate to zoning. The city and the Board of Public Works held a meeting with property owners of lots on Savannah Road where the BPW is extending sewer and water infrastructure. Mayor Becker and I were there and talked to them about annexation and have done some additional outreach, and we'll be following up after the first of the year. The ad hoc committee for the review of the Code of Conduct met on November 5th, but really focusing on the scope of the review and kind of a plan for moving forward. Their next meeting will be on the 16th of December. We provided you all an update last month about our working group to implement the beach parking recommendations. We have scheduled a public workshop at 5 o'clock on January 18th at the Rollins Center. A mailing will go out to all property owners in Lewis on January 3rd. that will invite people to the workshop, and we will also do email blasts and press releases. Councilpersons Jones and Saliba and Ellen Lorraine and I have been working to explore a pilot shuttle program for the city to run during the summer months. So we are working on putting together the details of that so that we can bring it forward as part of the budget discussions. And then as I think you had asked earlier, Mr. Ritzert, we are working with GMB staff and the solicitor to resolve some questions about the municipal boundary in several areas where it's not entirely clear. So we are working on that. I think we have a meeting scheduled for early January. And our Human Resources Administrator, Shelby Shockley, completed the Wilmington University Supervisory Academy in November. So last year we had Rick Melendez and Allison Kirk complete that, and now Shelby has done it as well. So.
Thank you. Any questions for Anne Marie? Any questions from the audience?
Yes.
One, man, go ahead.
From Zoom, Janice Allmers, she has a question regarding building permits. She's asking if it's lowered due to the application. She's asking if there's lower applications because of the requirement of the fire suppressant systems that need to go through the state fire marshal because the city does not have the staff trained to review these plans.
I don't believe so. We typically issue anywhere from 1 to 4 new home permits in a month, so we issued one. It may slow it down a little bit as we're getting the new process in place, but I don't think it is making a big difference.
Also, there's a seasonality to building permits a little bit, so.
Anne Marie, I have a question. Is that all, Kayla, right now?
Yes, sir.
I have a question regarding the new rental license. Are some of those attributable to the actions of the host compliant, what was it called? Host compliance?
We are finding, yes, Host Compliance is the company that we use, and we are finding some new rental permits for that reason. So yes, I don't know how many of them are attributed to it. I can certainly find out. I'll start asking her to provide that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the table for Anne Marie or the audience? Do you have anything else in the chat?
No, Mayor.
Good. Hearing none, I think we can accept that report. Thank you, Anne Marie. Very nice report by common consensus. We can then move on to item H1, which is presentation and possible action on a resolution to set a public hearing on an ordinance to amend Article 2, Administrative Responsibilities, Article 12, Administrative Reviews, Variances and Special Exceptions, Article 13, Conditional Uses, and Article 14, Development Plans, Certificates, and Permits of Chapter 197, Zoning of the Municipal Code of the City of Lewis, Delaware, by amending Section 197-22, Building Official Section, and Section 197-91, Administrative Review, Appeal of Administrative Decisions and Determinations, Section 197-95, Application and Review Process, and Section 197-101, Zoning Compliance Report, and Section 197-102, Temporary Uses as it pertains to the role of the building official and the city planner. We are only setting a public hearing here tonight, and there will be no discussion from the audience or from the table this evening. We're here to set a public hearing. I think we are looking at holding that public hearing on January the 13th. Is that correct?
Yes, at 6 p.m.
6 p.m., and that will be held at the Rollins Center. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So we need a motion to set that hearing.
I'm sorry, what's that date again?
January 13th
Thank you.
at 6 p.m. at the Rollins Center.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to set that date?
Yeah, I make a motion.
Okay, Carolyn, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Tim. With the motion and a second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Moving on to item H2 is presentation and possible action on a resolution to set a public hearing on an ordinance to amend Article 9 Environmental Protection Regulations of Chapter 197 zoning of the municipal code of the City of Lewis, Delaware by amending Section 197-73 floodplains relating to substantial damage and substantial improvement. Here again, we are not taking public comment tonight. We will certainly want to hear public comment at a public hearing that we will set, and I believe we are planning to hold this on the same day, January 13th. And it will immediately follow.
Immediately following the
other one.
the other one.
Okay, okay.
Okay.
Mayor, can I just add something? I just did want to follow up the question of, we were striking the language 10-year period, and there was a concern brought forward by Councilpersons Williams and Saliba that we, by unspecifying it, it could lead to more confusion. So the ordinance has been amended to say 1 year period. So I did want to draw attention to that because it was brought up after we initially put it in the packet. The updated packet has the corrected version.
And I think you've already put it online as a corrected number.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's already there. Okay, so we need a motion to set that hearing immediately following the previous one that we just set on January 13th.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? And moving on to item H3 is presentation, possible action on a resolution to set a public hearing on ordinance to amend Article 2, Administrative Responsibilities, Article 5, Dimensional Regulations, Article 7 of Off-Street Parking and Loading of Chapter 197, Zoning of the Municipal Code of the City of Lewis, Delaware, by amending Section 197-20, Historic Preservation, Section 197-21, Commercial Architectural Review Commission, Section 197-55, Building Height, Section 197-61, Off-Street Parking, and Section 197-62 of Off-Street Parking to address code clarifications and corrections. And here again, we'd like to set this hearing on the same night, immediately following the two previous ones that we just set. So January 13th, it's going to be a long evening, I suspect. But we would entertain a motion to set that public hearing on the 13th.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. Then moving on to item H4. And H4 is presentation and possible action regarding required documents to be submitted for a request for lease extension. Emery, you want to talk about this? Or Tim, do you want to take the lead on this one?
Sure, thank you. This subject was first brought up a couple months ago, and we decided to defer the discussion until this evening. What this has to do or pertains to is the idea that when a lessee requests a lease extension, that we have sufficient and adequate documentation to, in fact, support the lease extension. The city already requires that a lessee provides a survey, and what this is about is the idea that the survey be a current survey, and with the idea that the survey would be prepared by of course, a licensed surveyor, and that that documentation would accompany the lease request. And that, in effect, is the suggested change. We already require the survey. What is being stipulated here would be that it would be a current survey. I think that's a fair representation.
I think I would have a question regarding what constitutes a current survey. Is there a date certain? Is it 5 years? Is it 2 years? Is it,
Before you get to that, though, I think you should probably articulate what you're trying to accomplish by having a current survey versus one that's, say, 20 years old.
Right, and thank you very much. I'll speak to that. It has been the practice that the city has accepted any survey that an applicant provides at the time that they request the survey, with no regards to its accurate representation of, in fact, what is sitting on the lot. So speaking to the business of what is considered current, I have suggested that a survey that is approximately no more than 12 months old would be satisfactory for the purpose of a lease extension. And that would give the applicant the opportunity, and that, by the way, the date on a survey is affixed by this surveyor who completes the survey. And the idea here is that once that survey is completed, the lessee would prepare the request for an extension, and then that survey would certainly still be mostly very accurate to what is actually sitting on the parcel, on the lot, at the time that it comes before council for review and approval, consideration and approval.
Have you looked at this in terms of cost?
Well, I have looked at it with respect to the cost that the city incurs for a lease renewal, and I've also looked at, I have a figure that was offered by Janelle when this subject was first brought up a couple months ago, and that relates to the costs associated with hiring a surveyor to do the work, the field work, and preparing the paperwork. And I believe she gave a range of between $600 and $800. I will remind everyone here that these leases run for a 99-year term. 99 years, and
So what is your real concern that unless we do a survey, we don't have an accurate, I mean, what's your real concern here?
Well, push it around. So, well, to get at that, it's just how detailed. You know, the city wants to move to GIS, for example. How detailed can that get? Meaning, like, is a satellite image or whatever that's pulling from also going to be able to accomplish? You know, here's the boundary, here's what sits over it.
So the GIS and the aerial photography.
Explain what GIS is.
GIS.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Sorry.
Sorry.
Geographic Information System, which is a mapping system that is driven by databases, so it's kind of smart maps. So the parcel layer in the GIS is not survey quality data, and because the earth is curved, the way it lines up with the aerial photography isn't 100% accurate in terms of property lines versus improvements on the land. So there's always some distortion there. So that would certainly give us some information, but it doesn't give us the precision that a survey would.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, we have a question from the chat. Can we take the chat first? Then
Okay.
They raised the question before you raised your hand, Nick. We'll get to you, okay? What's the question?
Oh, no, I was going to make a comment about the lease extension and what gets submitted, if that's okay. So I understand the length for the survey, but does it not count that they get pictures as well? Because the pictures get submitted as long with the lease extension of current, the same time that the lease extension is presented.
Pictures would not necessarily show encroachments.
Right, or a property line. Right. So it's supportive evidence, yes, but it's not going to be, pardon?
Yes,
It's not as, it's not reliable documentation as opposed to a survey prepared by a land surveyor, a licensed land surveyor.
The photos pick up, they're going to demonstrate the most notable, egregious.
Right.
Are there lease extensions, like on this side of the canal, for example, that are less than 99 years?
The only lease extensions less than 99 years that I'm aware of are on the open space along Pilot Town Road.
And they're not by right leases, though. So it's a different, type of
Those are
lease.
all leases that are 10 and 10, and they all come due
the same time.
in 25.
25.
Right, that's what I thought, yeah.
Nick, did you want to make a comment? Please come up and
I actually have a question.
Sure.
Nick Carter, 1510 Bay Avenue. So the 99-year lease, I think there was a survey that was done recently by the city on Lewis Beach, and most of the property lines were identified. So my question is, when you have a lease renewal request and you're requesting that the homeowner submit a survey, does that then mean what type of enforcement or involvement does the county get into regarding encroachment on city property and/or state property along Cedar Street?
I mean, in the past, and again, noting that the surveys haven't always been entirely current, in the past, when a lease extension has come forward and an encroachment has been identified, mayor and council have made a decision at the time of the lease extension on whether the encroachment needs to be removed. In some cases, they've been removed entirely. In other cases, it's vegetation that they've asked to be cut back. In other cases, it's landscaping that they've accepted as a condition that they're not going to require removal at this time.
Dennis, you want to come up? We'll get to you, Rick. Sure. Thank you.
Dennis Reardon, 1302 Bay Avenue. I'll go back to Carolyn's question. What's the real purpose? Is it to identify encroachment, or is it to identify the property lines?
It's both. I would suggest it's both.
What's the purpose of identifying encroachment?
Well, we have a responsibility if there's an encroachment on city right-of-way.
Yes.
Correct?
I understand
And
that.
so, right, and then with a survey, if that survey captures property points and the encroachment, then we know definitively how egregious the encroachment is. It's not open for interpretation, it's actually documented.
I understand that.
Right, so that would be very beneficial for, I believe, for council and for the city.
Okay, and I'll go back to Anne Marie's comment that what we did in the past was when a renewal came up, we looked at the encroachment only as it related to parking. And if we had to remove it, we would tell them, you'd have to remove it. If not, we let it go. And back to your question, if you're going to do this for the leasehold property, are we going to do it for the whole city, which also has encroachment? I mean, are we targeting one particular area? Or are we looking at this citywide? And are we doing one area wide? I'll let you go.
Thank you.
Rick, come on up.
No, that's it. All right.
Do you want to answer? Do you?
Yeah,
Please do.
okay.
Okay.
You turned it off.
Get an answer.
Okay.
When you walked away, we thought maybe...
I'm sorry, I thought I was going to give you a chance to answer.
You said you'd let you go. I thought you were done.
No,
Okay.
I'll let you answer the question. I'll stand here until you answer it.
Okay,
Hey.
thank you. Dennis. The intention here is to create accurate documentation, and it would be, it's not our intention to become, how should I put this? An enforcement agent, basically. We would have the ability to have a clear understanding of how much or how many encroachments exist on the property, but we would also have the benefit of making sure we would understand where all the improvements on the property sit in relationship to the property lines.
Okay.
And that is a very important need that we have. Sheds are put on buildings, other improvements are made, driveways have been put in the past, possibly without proper permitting, and this would give us an opportunity to capture what is sitting on that property at the time of the lease extension.
Okay. Now, could I get an answer to the other part of the question? Is, are we going to do this throughout the city, or only on the leasehold property, which is the Warner Grant. And we have other properties in the city that encroach into the right-of-way. They have buildings put on them, and how are we going to look at them and enforce them without, because my point is, if we're not looking at it citywide, why are we targeting one area?
I understand that. But the fact is that we only have leases in certain areas of the city.
It's only on the beach.
Lewis Beach is not, pardon?
It's only on the beach, it's only the Warner Grant.
That's correct.
But what about the rest of the city? There are properties that are sold. There are ways to look at all of them when events occur.
That's correct. But what we have in front of us is a discussion about the leasehold properties.
Okay, well, I'll go back. Why only the leasehold properties? Why are we not looking at it citywide?
Well, we can certainly look at it citywide for encroachments, but there is a purpose here for this, for the lease that is separate from just encroachments. Okay? That is an aspect of what would be captured here, but it's not the
Are
only.
you going to suggest that you're not going to renew a lease if there's some encroachment?
No, I've been advised by our solicitor.
I was here when he said it.
Right. For the record, we have been advised that we, as a matter of, you've described it as a matter of right, I believe, and therefore we are not in a position to deny an applicant's request for an extension. Okay, but we are in a job of managing our business, and the city business is to make sure that we have good, accurate documentation, and that's what this is about.
And it's a considerable expense. 1 year, I suggest, is pretty tight. At least the survey isn't going to show you everything. And again, if we're going to do that and cause people to incur that expense within 12 months of a leasehold extension, are we going to do the same thing in the rest of the city?
Well, I think Anne Marie's in a better position to speak to this than I am, but I would think that if possibly the equivalent of a lease extension in the rest of the city might be if an applicant comes before the city with a building permit request for an addition, for a renovation.
I just raised the question. I think there are opportunities to do it throughout the city.
Absolutely.
That would make me feel a lot better about it, that it's not targeting one area within the city.
No, it's absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
Rick Quill, 407 East Market Street. Yeah, I just got hit by this over there. And so my comment, I think, Tim, your aim is true. You're putting a lot of thought into this. My position comes from an antagonistic point of view, and I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm just saying the things that have been going on the beach and the things that go on in town, I see Dennis's point, I see Nick's point, and I see your point, Tim. But, I don't know, we have this bucolic town. It's the best in the state of Delaware. And people take a lot of pride in their properties. They put a lot of investment in it. And we know for a fact that you are absolutely correct, Tim, that there's been encroachments on the beach side of town on leasehold. But with a 99-year lease, there adds another element to an enforcement. And I don't want to make it a beach and a town. You just had Rodney. I know that. I know you're not. But I think what Dennis was saying is you had a contentious issue, and it's still before us, about people on a certain street and about improvement of the street, and they were talking about their landscaping and whatnot. I wasn't in all of those meetings, but it's pretty much ties in. I just believe in, and again, and maybe I'm naive in living and let live, and I believe that if there are major issues, I think they can be resolved on a case-by-case study. But by coming before with a 99-year lease, and by the way, I don't have to worry about it on my property at 203 because I got 99-year leases there a couple years ago. But I don't even know on my property on 407, and I put under contract 209. I don't even know what that lease is. I see the goodwill. I see the good intention. You have to have standards. You have to have consistency. I get all that. But sometimes when they're at the cost of making people pitting people and giving them anxiety or angst. I just don't know what the answer is. And I go with what, that brought me to this town, why I love this town, is I'm always conscious of my neighbors in anything I do. And my neighbors are always conscious of me. And if there is an issue, a case-by-case issue, I just think enacting legislation where, in order, to me, the perception of you're going to get a 9-year lease, but you got to do this and that. And by the way, there are maybe a condition over top of it that we can make you do something. I just don't know if that's the right approach. I just don't know. But I believe me, Tim, I know your aim is true. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
Nick? Go ahead, Nick.
So I'll go back to the question about enforcement. Did you say that if someone comes before the council with a lease extension request with a survey that has obvious encroachments on city property and/or state property, meaning the extension, the side 12 feet beyond the bike lanes on Cedar Street, and they have a clear obstruction and encroachment, how do you determine, what do you do next? I mean, do you tell them that you have to remove their fence and their driveway, and how are you going to do this case by case? It seems like it would be a very convoluted exercise, an illegal exercise. But I don't know if there's an answer to that. But Cedar Street, as you all know, is controlled by DELDOT.
Right.
And supposedly, there's a shared jurisdiction between the city of Lewis and DELDOT. Well, there's no such document that I know of. There is not one. So who enforces the encroachment on state property? Is the city going to do that, or is the state going to do that? And then how do you grant the extension if they're a violator?
But you advised us before, we have to grant the extension, correct?
How do you do that?
Right.
I mean, the extensions, as they're set out in the original 9-year leases, which, were a long time ago, are pretty thin by today's standards. By today's standards, a lease arrangement has, is multi-page, many pages, and so typically the leases that were set out back then were a few sentences long in the instrument. So it doesn't have all of those things that you might have had or you'd have today. So, but they are, it basically says, should the lessee request another 99 years, the city council will grant it. It doesn't give discretion, so it's that's why I refer to it as a by right extension. I think what Tim is, Councilperson Richard is suggesting is that this provides an opportunity for the city to capture if there's an existing encroachment. And it's an opportunity to have a conversation with that lessee. We've noticed now that you have an encroachment through this process, we'd like you to remove it. We're going to grant the extension. There are other mechanisms the city has to remove encroachments on city land should the owner not want to do it, and it rises to the level that the city wants to remove it. So that would be a separate legal proceeding to remove it. Now, the question about Cedar and it being state and whether the city has the authority to remove encroachments on Cedar, that's a different legal question that I truly have not reviewed. I mean, it would identify those encroachments again, and it might be a process that would have to involve DELDOT to remove those encroachments should the city want to do that. So this is an opportunity to identify those encroachments should you require a survey. I'm not speaking to the merits of whether it's a great idea or a bad idea because I don't have a vote, but it's an opportunity.
Right. Does this become a legal issue? I mean, if I'm encroaching on city or state property and the council says I'm not going to give you the lease extension until you remove the encroachment, and I say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that, what's the next legal step? I mean, is there a lawsuit involved where the city sues the property owner, or they don't agree to the extension? So now the property owner may be in violation of the lease and the Warner Land Grant. I mean, it's a very convoluted process, I think.
Yeah, it could be a legal proceeding. It could result in a legal proceeding to actually have that encroachment removed. Hopefully it doesn't, but yeah, it could.
But the critical thing is, Nick, please remember that the lease extension is, as Glenn described it, is a by right. You know, we are not in a position to deny that from the applicant.
So why have the application? Well, I mean, if you can't deny it,
the property owners or homeowners on the beach are approaching the city. It's my understanding that they're approaching the city prior to the 99th year of the existing lease, and they are asking for extensions for the purpose of mortgages and whatever. So, you know, we are simply reacting to the request from the lessee.
I think Mr. Carter was asking, though, why even go through the process? If it's by right, why isn't it an administrative box that's checked and they get the next 99 years and Anne Marie can do that? The answer is because as elected officials, they own all the city land. So anything that's done with city land, they have to bless it, and they have to be given the opportunity to say no. And maybe that lessee then will sue the city and say it's a by right deal, you have to grant it to me. But the answer is nobody can do anything or provide any interest in land except for the 5 individuals here. So they have to at least approve it.
It's over and over and over again.
It's an anomaly.
It is.
I agree, Anne Marie, I do.
And, you know,
It's a difficult situation for city council, I think, because who knows, if somebody says, no, I'm not going to do it, correct, then you have another problem.
Exactly. But at least if we were to adopt this, at least we would have the proper documentation. You know, we would have captured what it actually exists on that property, on that particular place.
This is where I have an issue is what you're proposing is because there were surveys when they put this in place, the practice of doing surveys, and
Well, no, that's not true. Actually, wait a minute. It's a fairly recent practice of the council to require a survey to be submitted at the time of a lease renewal. So years ago, when the original settlers came and they, divided the land, there was no survey documentation. This is a new practice, okay?
The city owns the land. It should be up to the city to determine where are the encroachments, and I just don't feel that each individual, you're just adding something that, again, we're not also, you have the documentation, but to what we've been discussing, to what end? You're not going to be able to enforce it until the person comes and says, I want to make a substantial improvement to my lot, and then that becomes your opportunity. Otherwise, we're not...
Well, then, if that's the case, then are you suggesting that we eliminate the requirement of any survey to be accompanied with a lease renewal? Is that what you're suggesting?
I'm not seeing what benefit it really gives us to the point that's brought up is, what are we even doing with the photos?
Well, let me draw another equivalency. And I've used this in previous discussions with other people in the community. So this is not going to be an original thought this evening. Let me create an equivalency of if you were renting an apartment. It's the idea that you meet with your landlord and you do an assessment of the condition of the property.
Exactly. So that's when you have the building official, so they're paying a fee, right, to renew the lease.
Okay, yeah.
What's there a fee associated with the application?
$350 or something. It's right.
$350.
That should be the person stepping foot onto the property and going, yep, looks like your shower's over in neighbor Jones's yard. Gonna have to, maybe work with neighbor Jones over there to, or...
But how are you going to establish even where that property line is if you haven't done
You just said
the survey?
we've done that should all be plotted out.
But they're not, Andrew. Those stakes were placed a little more than a year ago, correct, by a contractor. And I saw wooden stakes in the ground. I didn't see iron stakes, and they also weren't required to go lot by lot by lot. They went to blocks and did corner property points.
Then maybe this, if there's a $350 fee, maybe there's a halfway house where you say the fee includes the survey, and that's what you're doing. And then as a council, then we look at the survey and go, yep, looks like.
So are you suggesting that the city conduct a survey? Is that what you're suggesting?
Potentially.
Well, then, we should have reason to believe that our survey costs would be the same as an individual property owner. So that's another $600. So that's another $600 or $700, $800, and we already are incurring the cost of legal fees. Okay, there are legal fees that we are billed for by Glenn's firm for preparation of leases, for reviewing leases. So we need to recover those costs too. So now we're driving up the application or the renewal fee. We can certainly do it that way. We could enter into that's a possibility. The critical thing is, I think it's important that we capture what is actually being leased, and we don't do that right now.
We need to.
Okay. All right, you have a question?
I have quite a few questions on here. Yes, they're all from the same person.
Okay.
It's all from Ellen Brotman. First question is, why can't they just submit a copy of the deed? First question. Second question is, where is the information available on past practices of handling encroachments? And then the last question is, how can the city impose a burden on a right you must grant? It's a bad preset to set. What other conditions might future council impose as part of the renewal process? Separate encroachment issues from lease renewals, which are part of each owner's rights.
And that was the part I was getting at, which is when this was framed out initially, there was no requirement for people to submit, anything. And that's how, there's got to be a certain element of being a town and kind of settle, I get it. I get what you're, to Rick's point, I get what you're saying about there needs to have order, and I just don't know it's an overly, we're adding layers and layers to what used to be a simple process.
Just for a frame of reference, prior to 2018, we did not have a survey at all, nor did we take pictures. I mean, it was really just the lease document in the packet, and
We added the photos on the lease requirement in 18.
Right.
And it's helped in terms of our understanding, so.
Yeah, I think the photos are helpful to see kind of the, where something's really encroaching. And
Rick,
I would defer to Kevin.
Kevin, okay, you want to come up, Kevin? You haven't had a chance to speak, so the floor is yours.
I wasn't intending to.
Okay.
Kevin McGinnis, 1108 Bay Avenue. Good evening. And I just wanted to say, unrelated to this discussion, before I get to this discussion, I just thought the Christmas parade was fantastic in the back.
Wasn't it?
And it's related to the whole city.
You guys don't warm up a room.
You've had your intro now.
All I wanted to say, having listened to this discussion, things were said that I think if you were listening to it and not actively involved in it, you might want to wonder a little bit about what's happening. And I would just wanted to suggest that the city often does ordinances. They don't provide a lot of explanation, or they don't provide regulations. They don't provide clarifications. We talked this evening about a proposal that we would pass. We couldn't deny the 90-year lease, but it might lead immediately to the city suing the property. I would just suggest that perhaps, given the discussion and all of the issues that have been raised here, you might want to give some consideration, if you move forward with this proposal, to kind of clarifying what you're going to do with this information. I think that would help, and it might calm some fears that are being generated by this discussion. One of the things we all learn, I'll be brief, sir, I'm sorry. One of the things we've all learned is there are encroachments, and there are encroachments on West Beach, as there are throughout the city. I believe, for example, technically a house sits in the right-of-way on a couple of streets.
On Ohio.
Well, I wasn't going to go there. There are also there is a road, Bay Avenue, that's on homeowner property.
That's correct.
That has been created. I just think there are a whole bunch of issues at work here that you're going to really have to think through, not only about what you want to address as a way of, once we find out about these things, what do we do next, but to explain, to calm everybody down a little bit about what this all really means. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I speak to that real quickly? Because that's, is this on?
No, I don't think so.
Is it on now? Is it on now?
Now.
Kevin kind of captured my thinking as I've been listening here. I certainly know Tim in his proposal is operating in complete good faith. We've had a number of conversations about this, and I think it's interesting. I'm going back and forth as I listen. Okay, this makes sense. Pictures show a lot. Sometimes they don't show everything. A current survey would show everything. However, this is getting over $1,000. So that's cost is starting to factor in to this whole issue. But I think we're at the point where we had mentioned a few weeks ago in a public about being more deliberate about things. I'm certainly not ready to make any kind of decision on this evening, although I would encourage all of us to continue talking about it and talking about how we define, what is a removable encroachment? These are all tough questions. And, but I think Tim has done us a service by raising this issue and using the 99-year leases as a trigger to kind of understand what's out there and this will be new information to the city in many situations, but I do question also for what purpose. As was, why do we need this information? And I want to explore that more. But I just thank Councilperson Ritzert for raising this, and I think there's been great comments here this evening, a lot of concerns raised, and I think it's just worthy of more discussion.
I think you're absolutely right, Khalil. I think there are points here that are worth considering. But I don't think that we're ready to take action on this tonight. I think that we need a little more study on this, and what would we do with it, and how would it, and what's realistic. And so I would suggest that we consider tabling this and working on it further. I think you've got support here at the table for let's pursue it a little bit more and come up with something that we can inform the public with before we take action.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to work I look forward to working with you all.
And I would just echo what has already been said by Rick and Councilperson Saliba, which is by all means, Tim does everything he does out of the concern for the city and making sure the city is protected, and that's where this comes from. It's not he's looking to target anyone or any of that.
Okay.
I concur.
So I think we can table this evening.
Sure.
All right. I don't think there's any reaction required. We just table it. Okay. Move on then to item H5, which is presentation of possible action on the scope of the five-year plan for the five-year review for the 2015 comprehensive plan. Anne Marie, you want to talk about this? I know Janelle's off in Hawaii someplace, so I don't think she's going to be online to talk to us about it.
Well, Janelle is enjoying the sun of Hawaii. I will go through this. So our five-year review of the comp plan is due in October. Based on the meeting that we had, joint meeting of the Planning Commission and City Council on November 30th, what we are proposing as staff is that it would be an addendum, that our review would be an addendum to the comprehensive plan, that we would summarize the development trends in the last 5 years and some of the demographic changes and changes in housing. I mean, and I know we've all talked about, just even with COVID, more people relocating here permanently because they no longer have to be in person at work. So we would look for the addendum to help resolve the disconnects that members of council and the Planning Commission identified, and to develop the recommendations for the next 5 years on code amendments and other policies that are needed to implement the comprehensive plan. So there were several policy areas that stood out that you all identified as needing to be reviewed, including annexation, utilities, environmental protection, housing, and historic and cultural resources. And the process that we were laying out would be that we would have one public workshop to be held at the beginning of the process to gain feedback on policy areas with the specific focus of those policy areas previously stated. Based on that input, there would be meetings with the Planning Commission to review the public input and develop the addendum. Then they would hold a public hearing and submit their draft to you, after which you would hold a public hearing, and then we would submit the addendum to Plus, and that we would then get their comments, incorporate it.
And possibly come back with further revisions and have another public hearing.
Possibly, and to have it done by October 2022. I think as long as we're well underway by then, the state's not
Yeah,
going to
they've been very realistic, very workable in terms of granting extensions if you need them.
So-
But I do think this gives plenty of opportunity for public input.
Right, so we wanted to get a proposal for a consultant to work with this scope and
Have we identified a consultant?
so my thought is we should probably send it out to 3.
Okay. That would be, so you're really going to do an RFP?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So I think the action here tonight is really to get, is this the scope we want to concentrate on, and then get the idea of going out with an RFP?
We need a motion?
We do.
To move forward with this plan?
Okay.
I'll make a motion to move forward with this plan.
Yeah, I'll second it.
5-year review.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? Item H6 is presentation of possible action on a request to include the basement renovations and the renovations authorized for the police station. You may recall that during our capital projects meeting, we talked about the basement of the police department, which has not been renovated in a long time and is in dire need of some updating and also some issues relating to groundwater that seems to be intruding into the basement, and I know that they put in the wells today to monitor that. And so this is, in terms of making our existing building, our existing police station, serviceable for this foreseeable future to serve our officers in a better capacity. There is a lot of space down there which is underutilized, largely because it's in pretty unsavory condition. So
I make a motion.
Okay, thank you.
Include this basement
No discussion?
renovations and the renovations.
Okay, great. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Khalil. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah.
No opposed, nothing, no one's opposed, all, motion carries. Moving then on to new business, item I1 is presentation of possible action on recommendation from H Park regarding a demolition by neglect process and inventory of condemned buildings. I think this is something that was an oversight when the CARC regulations, and the H Park regulations were developed, which allowed a structure, if it was in deteriorated condition, to be condemned without going through the H Park process. And we did lose a historic structure as a result of that oversight, and this is an effort to identify that and correct it going forward.
And just to clarify, I mean, so there's, I think, several layers to this. One is that there would be some notification or review by H Park when something gets to that process, or to that stage in the process. But I think more importantly, what we discussed with Barbara for now was the need to create a process that intervenes before you get to the point that something's been vacant for 30 years and is deteriorating.
So I have a question on that. So this is sort of for the discussion we were just having.
Right.
To what extent can the city then force a property owner to bring repairs to their home?
The city can do that.
I think we can force them to mow their grass.
It gets complicated. There are things we could do. Some have more teeth than others, but certainly we could start, what did we call it when we met with Barbara? Like a list of kind of properties that are on the radar that we want to reach out to the property owners.
An inventory of them.
Yeah, an inventory that,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, it's an inventory of properties that are in jeopardy. We've got 2 or 3 in town that fit that category. They've either been tied up in an estate or something else, and they're just being allowed to sit. And, the alternative would be for the building department to move around and condemn them. And there is a case a long time ago where the city actually tore down a house because the owner didn't take care of it.
We did one not long ago, it just wasn't in the historic district.
Well, if it becomes unsafe, I mean,
That's,
so I guess is there an ordinance in front of us? Like,
There's not an ordinance, so they've made a recommendation, and I think what we're looking for is, what is the desire of council? Do you want us to move forward to work on developing some ordinance language?
I guess, again, to me, it seems like the same conversation we just had, which is, it's great in concept, but what do you do with that information if the city, they identify, oh, this house is like 10 years away from condemnation?
I think one of the things that there's nothing right now that provides a vehicle for the city to reach out to this, other than the building officials would go there. In the property in question, the owner is absentee, and I don't believe that the city ever reached out to them. And there's another property.
They did.
Did they?
I have a question, and it's going to go back to that favorite word I've been using today, and it's a survey. Is it a fair expectation that members of the H Park Committee would spend any part of their assignment as a committee members walking around the community, taking in the actual conditions of properties, rather than just coming together in a meeting when a meeting is called, scheduled, and that they discuss applications? The other question I have is, now, and I'm really out there on a limb on this one because I don't know what I'm talking about. And that is...
Okay, we'll stop there.
He tries to work that in once a meeting.
And you all are listening once again.
I'm hanging on every word.
Yeah. And that is, I seem to think I remember hearing that there was, I think I've heard this from the H Park Committee, that there is a survey done.
Yeah, I can ask about that too.
And it is addresses, I think, the inventory that I think you might have suggested. And where is that in there? I thought they were supposed to report out to us, or...
The survey is done.
Oh, the survey is done.
There's, I think, another piece that...
Not much, but...
Right, it's mostly done. But and that really documents the history of the buildings, whether they're contributing structures, what year they were built, what year they might have had a renovation. But it doesn't, I mean, it's not necessarily a condition survey. It's not an assessment of, the structure, right, and the structure, a structural assessment or anything like that. I mean, I think the idea that we kind of talked a little bit with Barbara about was developing a way to say, okay, this house has been vacant for a couple of years. Let's start keeping an eye on it, reach out to the property owner, try to make sure that it doesn't fall into disrepair in a way that, you say, okay, at this point, it's...
Out of negligence.
Right.
Well, if you take the house they just took down, it was vacant for 30 years.
Right. So there's somewhere between a year and 30 years that you can intervene.
12 months is gone.
Yeah.
So I mean, basically, this is an idea for developing a change to the ordinance in H Park, which would direct the building official to, if they identify a property that was about to be condemned, that H Park would have an opportunity or would be asked to look at the property.
To look at it.
But we're asking H Park to develop a recommendation, correct?
No, they've developed their oh, you mean on an individual house on which?
No, on this.
They've given us a recommendation.
And that's what I see here?
Right. So that's the motion made by Mr. Thomason.
To return the paragraph to, I don't see the actual language here.
That's what I was asking, whether there was an ordinance that we're looking at.
There's not an ordinance yet, so
We'd have to move forward with developing an ordinance.
right, so, I mean, that's pretty much what we would need to do, is
What we're doing basically is authorizing Anne Marie and H Park to come up with an ordinance and bring it back to us for approval.
and it's probably going to involve Glenn, because I do think that it would involve some changes to where we adopt the property maintenance code, which is
Right.
where the demolitions are addressed.
Right, I mean, the property maintenance code currently that you have adopted, there comes a point in time where something's in enough disrepair that we can file a motion and get an order to go on the property and repair it as a city, and then lien the property, and then if the property ever changes hands, the city gets paid back, basically. So that's already in existence. This is a little bit different in that I think they're talking about things earlier in the game than...
Prospectively?
Yeah. Mhm.
But wouldn't it be correct that we don't have the benefit of the language in front of us, that H Park, their recommendation is not in front of us, correct?
They didn't have clear language that they put forward. It was more a concept.
Okay, well, I'd like to, may I respond to that? And my suggestion is that before we take action on this, that we ask H Park to develop that language so that we can then consider that and then possibly take action towards, assigning an ordinance preparation to you and Janelle and to Glenn. I mean, because right now, I'm not comfortable. I don't really know what the language is.
So I guess the question is, did H Park, when H Park sent this up here, I didn't listen to that meeting, are they intending to have, so H Park wants a role in the process?
Exactly.
So it's not a matter of we need something built in administratively and in the
They just want to
building?
be involved.
Right.
Carol, you sit in those meetings, you remember, you're the H Park rep.
Yes, absolutely. We simply want to know, in the case of what happened on Park Avenue, it was a house that sat for 30 years, and H Park had they just weren't involved in any way when it came to us going to the table, try to talk to the gentleman who bought it. So they're simply saying, is there some way that you can include us up front before you issue a demolition on a place?
So an ordinance will be drafted, and basically instructing our building officials to, if there's an issue in the historic district, to contact H Park to review, to determine whether it's of historical value or not, before it's condemned, destroyed, or whatever.
What really we need to consider tonight is, do we want to move ahead with asking H Park and the city to develop, and Marie, to develop an ordinance that they bring back to us to consider?
Right, exactly.
Okay. We're not making any permanent action here.
No. Well, I'll make a motion for that.
Okay. What do you have?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you.
So I was involved in the property on Park Avenue.
Okay.
And, the property, as you said, Carolyn, was inhabited for quite a while. I don't know how many years, but there was a little bit of disagreement between the family owners about what to do with it. And Robin Davis came to the property, and he was on the verge of condemning it. So I'm curious about, what happens next. I mean, is there an eminent domain policy in the city where the city can actually, I think you said, Glenn, put a lien on the property and then take the property back? And then who pays for the demolition? And if the property owner they should have some sort of property rights. They could come back and actually file a lawsuit against the city. I'm just asking a legal question.
Typically what happens...
We were on the verge of that, Carolyn, as you probably know. I mean,
you actually, it was. I mean, they got the letter from the building official saying that you had 60 days to demolish it, or the city would hire a contractor to demolish it. Right.
We've done that, and we absorb the cost, and then it's a lien against the property until such time as the property's sold.
Right.
okay. Well,
Okay, but
I think we sold it before the 60-day had expired, so
Right.
I think we got in under the wire. So, okay, I'm just curious legally what the next step is. Thank you.
Okay.
I would just say, this is an important piece of legislation to consider. Our historic district is not very big, and we have a lot of properties in it, and many of them are very, very well maintained, but there are some that are...
And they're simply asking to be a part of it.
Right, be part of the process.
They just want to be a part of the process.
If we
That's
have
what
a-
this is about.
You don't lose a historic district by demolition unless you have a tornado like what swept through Kentucky and Tennessee. But you do lose it one building at a time.
Yeah.
And if we're going to issue those demolition permits without any consideration of H-Park having buildings, without H-Park having a chance to at least work with the owner, we're slowly diminishing our historic district.
So I'd have to make a motion that we have them be involved, to be honest with you.
Yes, Dennis?
To tell you the truth.
Just a quick question. I agree with what you just said, because we did one on either Burton or Johnson.
Exactly.
And we took it down, with the city joined, I guess, the National Building Official Code, took the language from there, and we condemned the property, put a lien on it, and we paid for it and put a lien on it. But my question is, do you need an ordinance, or can this just be a policy of two organizations?
Well, the problem is...
The building official and because the building official would initiate the action on condemnation, and if you just say a policy, we let H-Park know before we do that.
Well, it would seem that simple.
It would seem that way, but it didn't happen.
It didn't, we would love it to have happened that way.
But could it happen? Taking up Dennis's suggestion, could it happen that way? Because we can't undo what has been done here.
Well,
We're looking
I
at our
have
perspective.
to defer to Glenn on that. I don't know if we can.
I'll let you guys figure that out. I just raised the question.
No, it's true. That's exactly what we wanted.
Sure, it could happen that way. As the mayor says, it didn't happen that way this time. One thing that I'll be wary of once the ordinance language is developed is that a building official has to retain some power, though, that if a building falls so far into disrepair that is in an immediate threat, that they have to be able to issue demolition permits. So I think what Anne Marie said earlier is that, working something into the ordinance that captures these properties earlier in the process, because, there comes a point where there's other liabilities the city has if they don't move forward with demolition.
Does it have to be an ordinance? Does it have to be an ordinance?
It does not have to be an ordinance. The building official's office could have a policy that says it will involve H-Park at some point in the game. So it does not have to be an ordinance.
Why can't we do it that way?
But I think perhaps, if you want the built-in protections of the historic district, an ordinance certainly has more assurances that it's going to happen.
Depends how serious we are about our historic district.
Well, we're serious about it.
If we're serious about it, we should make sure that the building officials give the chance to the H-Park to review it before they issue the demolition permit. I agree with you, Glenn. If it gets that far, it should come down. But I can cite another illustration where another property that was equally in poor condition has been renovated and it's been back on the market for in excess of $500,000. Okay. So.
Well, then I'll have to still go the route of doing an ordinance then. So
Did you have a comment?
Somebody made.
Okay, what you got?
Tom Panetta made a comment. He said that you may want to look at other communities that are covered by NPS historic guidelines, may have other demolished by neglect, and he attached a link.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
So I know Dover has a pretty good demolition by neglect section in their ordinance that we actually utilized when I was there, so.
So what is the pleasure here?
So what are we doing?
Well, do we want to direct H-Park and the city manager to work on an ordinance that would connect a derelict property being referred to H-Park before condemnation?
Yes, absolutely. So I make a motion to do just that. If I have to say those words again.
Maybe
I've said it 3 times.
Maybe Kayla's got it. Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to item I2 is discussion and possible action on the approval of a draft agreement for the maintenance of the section of Georgetown to Lewis Trail and the Lewis and Rehoboth Canal and Freeman Highway. This agreement is very similar to the agreement that we have with DELDOT and regarding how our responsibilities for maintaining the trail from Gills Neck Road out to Savannah Road. And basically, this is just an extension of it from the other side of the canal to Freeman Highway. Is there anything different in this ordinance?
Yeah, there's nothing different. I just wanted to, well, I shouldn't say that. I just had a question about, one of the things I noted in section 10 is that it says no motorized bikes.
Right.
And we've had discussion recently whether it's like these e-bikes, whether they should be on the trails or not. And the fact that it says motorized, I mean, I don't know, and again, this comes down to a common theme that we've been having tonight is about enforcement anyway.
So I think, and I have talked some to DelDOT about the e-bikes, and Class 1 e-bikes are not considered motor vehicles. Mr. Richard and I have had discussion about whether Class 2, so I think we need to do a little more research into that, and I have had Melody doing some research, but the way the state code reads, a bicycle would include an e-bike if it doesn't exceed 20 miles per hour.
Yeah, no, that's why I was looking for it to maybe reference that, like you said, what do they call them, scheduled bikes or whatever.
Right, the class.
It does say, just blanketly says motorized. It also says horses aren't.
Right.
No horses on there too, on the same paragraph, but that's why well, I guess I just raised this in general, is this to, and again, this goes back to a theme we talked about before, which is this our opportunity to have a revisit with DelDOT around the terms of this MOU and discuss maybe adding, rather than getting rid of motorized bikes, for example, is just putting in speed limits and things like that.
I would suggest that it might be a good opportunity to do it, but it might also be something for our bike ped committee to look at and come back with some recommendations.
Wonderful.
And that we could then take their recommendations to DelDOT. I think this is this is one component of it. And I like that approach. If we could seek that clarification for the entire length of the trail in the city.
Well, and I think that the Junction Breakwater Trail that's under Denrick jurisdiction and the sections of the Georgetown to Lewis Trail that are under the DelDOT jurisdiction, the bike rider doesn't recognize if I'm in the city's jurisdiction or I'm in Denrick's jurisdiction. So I do believe there's benefit to having a consistent policy. Right. So I think we definitely should have the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee discuss it, but I think that we need to probably have DelDOT at the table as well. And again, we can be more stringent. It just becomes difficult to enforce because if you're coming from Georgetown and you hit the city of Lewis and we have a different set of rules, it becomes a little unwieldy.
As I've said to the folks I've talked to about the Bike Ped Advisory Committee, that committee is going to become more and more important as this trail gets more and more used. As the Georgetown to Lewis Trail gets on, it becomes fully developed, our trail issues are going to grow astronomically. And so I think it would be appropriate for the committee to engage someone from DelDOT and have a good discussion about what is realistic for the trail, and for DelDOT to not only look at what's going on in Lewis, but look at what's going on these trails.
Right.
You got a 10-foot multimodal path that's trying to serve wheelchairs and baby carriages as well as these bikes.
And again, because there's kind of the nuance that we don't grasp as fully as some of the, some other communities who have dealt with the e-bikes for a longer period of time. I'm going to tell you, I think it was Janet, I was walking on the trail and somebody came buzzing by us, and I got to tell you, it was practically a moped.
Yes.
That's clearly not what is intended. So I think there needs to be, in addition to figuring out what's allowed, there needs to be the public outreach that goes with that.
Public education.
Right.
Right.
One of the things that it was commented to me by Bob Fisher when I was talking to him about his staying on the committee was he mentioned that in the state parks, they have state park ambassadors. And one of the things we may want to consider, and the Bike Ped Advisory Committee may want to consider, is a recommendation that we look for volunteers and would be
Bike ambassadors.
They've done a lot of groundwork on that.
Yeah, that was brought up some time ago,
Yeah,
ambassadors.
so I think, I think in the interest of moving this along, but knowing that we have a lot more to discuss, I would suggest we approve this.
I have a couple of questions about the MOU I'd like to address. First of all, I noticed on number 5 that the assignment of responsibility of removal of snow and ice is assigned to the city. Does the city own the equipment to actually remove that already, or is that?
Yes. So we have snow blowers, and we've got our Bobcat that we can use.
Okay, so that's, okay. Thank you. Number 6, what I want to address here is the fact that all the tree trimming, limb removal, all that stuff is assigned to the city. And that can represent a very large expense. And
We've been doing it, actually.
Yes, and what I want to suggest, though, is that before we actually affix your signature to this MOU, that staff, someone on staff, maybe this is something we assign to the Bike and Ped Committee, another thing for them, but someone actually walk the path and look very carefully at it to make sure that it's presently clear of all the debris, the branches, the trees, whatever it is, so that we are not incurring the expense and the management of this trail immediately. 5 years from now, I get it, but not immediately.
So, gosh, so this has been in no man's land for about 2 years now.
It is cleared.
It feels like it's 2 years, maybe it's not quite that long. But where we had verbally agreed to DelDOT and DENREC, because it was really built under DENREC and DelDOT, and a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So we had verbally agreed that we would take care of it, and just dealing with the bureaucracy and getting an agreement that we could sign has taken a really long time, just because it was, are we in an agreement with DelDOT or with DENREC? And
who's at the table?
Right. But back after the trail was completed, and it was clear to me that the MOU for maintenance wasn't going to happen quickly, I talked to Rick and asked him to keep the vegetation clear, mainly because this trail in particular, we're not talking a lot about tree branches and shrubs. We're talking about phragmites and marsh grasses, and I was finding they're getting very close to, getting into the asphalt.
Right.
And it was important to me that we not let the asphalt get compromised and then take it over. So we have been proactively maintaining it for the last couple of years.
Okay.
And I would also say that unlike the portion of the trail that's from Gills Neck to Savannah, which is built in the right-of-way, this is built on the rail bed.
With the exception of the part that goes behind the laydown area.
Right. But other than that, it is built entirely on a rail bed. So, and I've walked it many times in the last several months, and it's very clear. So.
One last small detail. I'm in the weeds on this one, and they're not phragmites. On page 5, I noticed that the MOU is prepared for Ted's signature, the mayor's signature, and I believe that the practice is that should be prepared for your signature.
So I can change that. That's not a problem.
Thank you.
There's always the option to authorize the mayor to sign it when you approve it and leave it the way it is. I mean, that's under the city code as well. So if you don't want to go through the process of changing it, you just need to say in the motion, we'll authorize the mayor to sign it.
Or how about authorize the city manager too, in this case?
I think it's fine. It's just that she's going to have to go back to the preparer and ask him to make that change.
Prepare another.
Okay.
No, just make the motion.
So I'll the motion, I'll make a motion to approve the MOU for the extension of the bike trail, and ask that the bike committee review the current MOU for any suggestions that we might want to address going forward and maybe revisions to the MOU.
Okay. All right, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Are you okay with leaving the signature as it is?
I'm fine, we just need to make sure we sign it tonight.
So that's part of the motion, the mayor
So you don't have
is authorized to sign. I'm fine with that.
Yes, so you don't have to tear this up again.
Fine.
So refer back to the comment about the shared jurisdiction between the city of Lewis and DELDOT, and there is no agreement that I know of, no written document whatsoever. And this not only refers to the current topic, this bike trail, who maintains it, who enforces it, but more importantly, who's liable or culpable if somebody gets injured. And I think if you're going to have a meeting with DELDOT, you probably should talk about the bike lanes on Cedar Street as well. And I hate to throw that in now, but it ties in with DELDOT, and it's a good conversation to have, because right now, DELDOT assumes, I think, that Lewis is taking all the responsibility. So the shared jurisdiction document does not exist.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. So we have a motion and a second on this agenda item. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah.
Okay, motion carries.
Yeah.
Okay, then moving on to I3 as review and possible action to approve a lease on 1612 Bay Avenue. This is a by right lease renewal.
It is the same that you've seen many times.
And I think we've had a lot of discussion about by right lease renewals earlier this evening. And any questions from the table on this one?
Not a question, but a statement I do want to bring to everyone's attention that the survey that is included is dated 2021, and it captures, of course, not only setbacks, where the buildings are, and it does also happen to include, shows some encroachments as well. But the critical thing is that it does show lot coverage, it shows, many things there, many elements of development.
Okay.
Right.
So do we have a motion to approve this?
Johnny Cash played that house, right, Nick?
Oh, I was there.
You're dating yourself, Khalil.
Well,
Yeah.
it is what it is. 1995.
Really?
Yeah. We're just talking about 1612 here, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
Is there a motion to approve that?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Khalil. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to I4 is review and possible action on a lease extension for 1613 Bay Avenue. And here we go again. This is a by right lease renewal. And is there any discussion at the table?
I will only offer that, as you mentioned, this is by right, and however, I am concerned about a recently installed bed of flowers on the Illinois side of the street. I'm going to strongly suggest that be removed and request that the owner do that. As Glenn has explained to us, we have to, this will be extended, but I mean, that was done not 30 years ago, not 20 years ago, but within the last year. And so I think that's something that certainly may impact, the parking plan.
Was it better plants, did you say?
They're small flowers.
Oh.
Yeah, it's about, from the end, it's on the corner, it's from on the Illinois street side of this property.
Of 1613.
1613, yeah.
And we received photographs this afternoon. Is it possible to pull those up on the screen?
The photographs really don't show, they don't show.
anything.
No.
Well,
They don't show the picture.
They don't show the actual plants that were placed there.
They're just showing the building.
No, they actually showed, the reason I'm questioning this, and I don't mean to hold this meeting up, but, yeah, you're right, I am. But I don't have copies of the photos with me, but there's some shrubbery near the corner, and I'm, for clarification.
That is not in.
That's not what you're talking about.
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about small flowers this tall, about 3 feet wide, about 10 feet long, that were just recently planted there within the last year.
I missed that detail, yeah.
All right. So Khalil has made a motion with the idea that we would ask the property owner to remove those plantings along Illinois Avenue. As in granting this. Is there a second to that motion? Okay, we have a second from Carolyn. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none.
I actually do have another, I'm sorry, Ted, excuse me. Khalil, I apologize for picking on this thing, but since this is so, are these plants in the right-of-way?
Absolutely.
They are in the right-of-way? Okay. And they're not at the corner, correct?
They go up to the corner.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll have to rely on your judgment.
The ask is, the motion includes the ask those plants be removed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving then on to item I-5, we have deleted, dealing with the signal agreement. And then moving on to I-6 is discussion and possible action or recommendation from the mitigation planning team to contract with Tony Pratt regarding his proposal to work with the city on beach erosion issues. Tony, I believe, was going to join us. Janet, is he there? He's
There's a hand up, so.
Yes,
Yep, yes.
Okay, would you bring him up, please? While you're bringing him up, I think Tony Pratt is well known to everyone in the room and everyone on Zoom, I would imagine. Tony has a great deal of expertise regarding the beach and beach erosion issues. Hi, Tony. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi, Mayor. How are you? It's good to see everybody.
Good to see everyone. Thank you very much. I know we've had some discussion about this, and you spoke at the mitigation planning team, and they've made this recommendation that we go forward with using your expertise to assess and try to resolve some of the issues regarding beach erosion. And perhaps you'd like to talk through that a little bit for us.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I was approached by a few property owners following the storm of a few weeks ago when the dune was so severely scarped or eroded so it's a vertical face. And it began a discussion that several of us had at the Children's Beach House, talking about, and I won't go into the full detail of it, it's in my proposal, and I've talked to several members of council about this already, but Lewis Beach is suffering, as most of the Delaware coast is, chronic erosion. Lewis Beach is made up of what's called a bounded beach system that has a jetty on the northern or western end at Rosebud Inlet by the yacht club, and a ferry breakwater at the other end where there's deposition of sand every year, a growth rate of about 11 feet per year. The middle section of Lewis Beach has been relatively stable for years, but the western or northern end of the beach is the sacrificial area. The Corps of Engineers in 2005 extended the jetty. They took out the old sheet steel jetty that was there at the Lewis side, replaced it with a rock jetty, and by so doing displaced the erosion waves that come out of the northwest winds, and now have created a sacrificial beach area east of where they have jurisdiction to work. So my proposal basically is to get the Corps of Engineers on behalf of the city and in cooperation with DELETIONS to get some treatment of the chronic erosion area, treat that section of beach as it is geographically or geomorphically, which is a feeder beach, a sand supply for the rest of Lewis Beach, and then further examine a few details I think that others wanted to discuss about other forms of shore protection and things of that nature. So in quick summary, that's what I'm proposing to do is in response to requests from property owners to put this proposal forward. And so I'm at your leisure to determine what you want to do with me.
Thank you very much, Tony. Other questions from the table? I know, Khalil, you've spoken with Tony.
Yeah, I have spoken. I spoke with Tony, and also want to acknowledge, by the way, Lewis Beach property owner Mike Hogan, who originally brought us all together for the initial meeting. Tony, as well as the mayor and others, were there. The proposal is very sound as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you offer a near-term objective of engaging DENREC to reshape the dunes, which I think is much needed in terms of access to the beach. You have a more longer-term objective of expanding the Army Corps of Engineers study area from the Lewis Yacht Club, which is currently from the Lewis Yacht Club to Iowa, roughly Iowa, Missouri, to the original study area all the way down to the ferry. So I think those are two objectives. I only wanted to add, and this is what Tony and I spoke about briefly today, is adding a third objective, and that would be to examine, study other mitigation beach erosion strategies such as seawalls, jetties, and other things that may also help prevent beach erosion. I think many of us are concerned in that this perpetual, unsustainable beach replenishment of constantly pumping sand has to be somehow mitigated or assisted with other measures like a seawall or something along those lines. So I am in full support of this proposal, and if no one else wants to make any more comments, I'm happy to make a motion.
I just had a question with respect to, Tony, beyond your fees, typically would a town like Lewis expect to share in setup costs or anything like that associated with some of the mediation that might be coming from what you find?
Well, right now, the partnership that exists legally is the Corps of Engineers paying, and it's an oddball, but it's typically 65-35 Lewis Beach, without getting into the details about it because of problems related to stabilizing Roosevelt Inlet. The cost share between the Corps of Engineers and what's called the non-federal sponsor, which in this case is DENREC, the state of Delaware, picks up all the non-federal costs. So the assumption going forward is that financial partnership will remain as it is. On a side to that, though, so going forward, any solution would be through the DENREC Corps of Engineers partnership, and the city has input as to what types of action can be considered and certainly promoted through DENREC as the non-federal sponsor. There is been discussion from DENREC, which is getting some fresh air these days, about looking at future expenses for all of the beaches that they cover through DENREC, which is from well up the Delaware Bay shore at Pickering Beach, down through the Delaware Bay, and down through the Atlantic Ocean coast to Fenwick Island, Ocean City boundary. That is a discussion that Secretary Garvin picked up a few years ago. There has been some indication that will be renewed, and there may be some local participation in the future. The county, in their accommodations tax that was granted by the General Assembly and has just gone into effect, has been designated as something that go to shoreline and waterway projects first and foremost. Most of the emphasis on inland-based waterways, but also beaches. So the county is certainly a possible player in future expenditures as well.
Yes, Nick.
Two things. One, I think there needs to be, Tony, I respect everything you do and your intellect and your coastal engineering experience. I think that we need to have some sort of an emergency plan. With a concern over climate change, the next storm could be right around the corner. And once you have the dune scarping, If the next storm, if it comes next week, it's going to just be further and further. So I think within your proposal or in your work, Tony, that we have some sort of an emergency plan when the next storm hits, that we have some action, what I call aggressive solution to restoring the dune. And the second point I want to make is, and Tony and I talked about this, I know that most of the sand that gets put on Lewis Beach between the Lewis Yacht Club and Iowa Avenue or wherever it ends up, it usually migrates down to Pilot Point.
Right.
And Pilot Point is growing at 11 feet per year, I believe.
Yeah.
And the residents of Pilot Point are complaining that it's about 5 football fields to get to the water now.
Right.
And I just would like to offer my conversation with the president of the Homeowners Association at Pilot Point, Mr. Ed Kingman, and he would be more than happy to sit down with you, Tony, DENREC, Army Corps, city council members, and anybody else that would like to sit down and have a meeting about how to maybe move that sand back to Lewis Beach and possibly Port Louis and Cape Shores.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Kayla has...
Gail, you got a comment?
Yeah, Nick's right. Nick and I had a conversation the other day and talked about this at length, and it's when John Hughes was my division director many years ago, this goes back 25 years ago, we approached Pilot Point, which at that time, because of their leasehold, because of the description of their lease that Dan Anderson got when Pilot Point was first constructed in the 1960s, it accretes with the beach. Their boundary on the bay side is to a either high or low water line. So any accretion accretes onto their leasehold, and so they have controlling decision making on that sand. And at that time, there was not a feeling of neighborliness. The sand's destiny there is actually to Cape Shores through the ferry terminal. The effect of the breakwater at the ferry terminal does exactly what it's supposed to do, is keep that sand from filling up their harbor. Now, the bay pilots have a problem with silt. The turning basin for the ferry has a problem with silt, and Cape Shores is running out of sand and continues to truck sand back in. So yeah, it's a bigger issue, and I'm certainly glad to tackle all the issues that the council would like me to tackle. I think we wanted to get our foot in the door in some emergency action. I've been already talking to DENREC and the Corps a little bit about moving forward on something in a more emergency way very quickly. So I think there's multiple tiers we can address.
I think, Tony, when we spoke, you talked about emergency action really has to come from DENREC, whereas Army Corps would be a longer lift.
Absolutely.
And
That's right. That's right.
Real quick question for you, Tony. Thanks for your joining us this evening. What would emergency action from DENREC look like?
It would be what's been done before and did under my watch. It would be trucking sand in. DENREC just opened a bid for available sand to be trucked to beaches. They're looking at the whole Delaware Bay shore. At this current time, Kitts, Hummock, and Pickering Beach are in dire need. There's water washing under houses almost every high tide in at least one of those communities. So they've developed a metric or a rational process to determine priorities, and the priorities right now are some of the upper bay beaches, but they, with the contract that they just opened, the price is a little bit higher than they're used to, and they've been informed that the sand availability from the truck hauling contractor, the availability is very limited because of the demand in the construction industry right now, and also some of that product goes to standing roads, so it depends on how much winter demand there is for that sand. But that said, Lewis is falling in behind 2 or 3 bay beaches to the north, and I will, if we pass this and we get going, I will be a nag on the phone to them about trying to get down to Lewis Beach simultaneously.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, you had a comment or something in the chat?
A request. Kay Carnahan.
You identify who it is from.
Kay Carnahan.
Kay Carnahan as the Parks Rec City Beaches Commissioner. She's asking, she would like to work with Tony Pratt on the erosion issues.
Okay, great. I think Kay and Tony have already spoken. Have you not?
Yes, we talked at the meeting at Joe's Beach House, we talked, and I absolutely, again, at your pleasure, I will be glad to involve her in everything I do.
Okay, great, thank you. Any further discussion?
I have just one more. Chip,
Just one, Chip.
Go ahead.
Come on, Chip. Didn't see you back there. You've been sitting quietly in the corner all evening.
I'm taking it all in.
Okay.
Chip Davis, 115 East 3rd Street. Just further the point about the sand coming from the Roosevelt Inlet down at Pilot Point.
Yeah.
The Cape Shore sand is going to the point.
Right.
Because if anybody walks that, I mean, that thing's extended hundreds of feet per mile. I'm sure Mr. Pratt knows that well as also.
Right.
So it's doing that same effect there. That point now is, it's going to be the Cape Mason.
Well, and I know Cape Shores is very interested in Tony taking a look at that situation.
Absolutely.
They've been trucking sand in for some time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And by their agreement with DENREC, they're responsible for doing that at their own expense, so. Okay, Kayla, what did you have anything other than the comment from Kay?
There was an anonymous one that.
Okay, well, we don't consider that. Okay. So we need a motion to approve this contract with Tony, if that's the pleasure of council.
I'll make a motion to approve this contract, and in addition to incorporating what we discussed regarding non-beach replenishment strategies, as well as an emergency plan.
Okay. Second. Motion and a second by Carolyn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We then move on to item I-7, which is discussable and possible action on a need to establish designated truck routes. Tim, this is your proposal. You want to take it?
Batter up, huh? Okay. Yes, thank you very much. What became, the proposal is that we create designated truck routes not for all trucks, but the idea here is that it would capture trucks that are of a certain size measured by weight, maybe by number of axles. And what I am trying to address is what became apparent to me during the month of November when there was construction work going on the Lewis Waterfront Preserve site, and there were what I described as a train of dump trucks, large dump trucks, carrying loads of dirt through the city to deliver to that job site. And then, of course, in turn, they were coming back through the city to get back out of town. During this particular time, it was when New Road was closed. So there was approximately a three and a half week period where New Road was closed through traffic. And all that traffic, it had no option but to come through the city to get to it. But I'm not only looking, I don't want us to just consider the importance of this as it relates to what happened in November at Lewis Waterfront Preserve, because we are all aware that there are a number of projects already on the books that have been approved or are subject to being approved during our next 12 months, let's say, certainly in a reasonable period of time. And what became clear to me is that we would help our neighbors, our residents of our community, if we actually designated routes that would hopefully move the traffic, the truck traffic that I've described, out of residential areas and into or onto state-owned streets. And the state-owned streets are clearly identified. I can list them right now if you'd like me to, but the critical thing is that the state-owned streets are primary roads, primary highways, and I think it's appropriate that this kind of heavy laden trucks be placed on those roads to the extent possible, and to help preserve our neighborhoods, keep our residents safe, and to protect our city-owned streets.
And I think you ought to emphasize what you said to me in an email about the other trucks.
The what?
Carolyn, we can't hear you.
Oh, about the delivery trucks? Oh, yes. Thank you,
I
Carolyn.
wanted him to say something.
Thank you. Carolyn has brought to my attention that this discussion would be directed towards construction trucks carrying
Significant weight.
significant weight. And you can describe it by weight, carrying capacity, number of axles on the truck. But I'm not suggesting that we regulate truck routes that are delivery trucks for the purpose of delivering appliances or lawn equipment or
propane or anything else.
Yeah,
like
any
that.
other kind of services.
Right.
This is focused on active construction sites and the trucks that are needed to support the construction.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
I think it's a good idea, and I support it. The one thing I see as a challenge, I experienced this today on, I think I was coming off of 4th, is that trucks with trailers, they're very tight to turn. And I think if you keep them on certain state-owned streets, for example, coming out of New Road, then turning onto Piletown Road, I'm not sure some of the trucks can negotiate, are able to negotiate that turn with a
You're absolutely
behind
correct,
trailer.
and this is a concern. It's a concern that I am aware of. But the only thing that I can share with you anecdotally is that the trucks that were actually using that route during November, carrying the loads, didn't hit the utility pole that's there at the corner. And as far as I know, they didn't run over any private property as well or damage any property. So apparently it is negotiable. I've also seen very large 18-wheel trucks use that intersection, and they actually are able to do it, believe it or not.
As long as there's another vehicle in that.
Right, it's not a pretty picture, but they are able to do it. But it is a
Would you
concern.
propose working with Dell, because we're essentially saying stay off of our street and go on to DELETIONS Street, are you proposing working with DELETIONS to say these are what we propose, or do you help us propose?
Sure. What I would expect is that since we do not regulate DELDOT roads, that we would have to bring them, have this conversation with them. We would have to express and justify our concerns and get them to, they possibly even already have a program or policy to address this kind of community concern. I would expect that they would.
They do, and I'll just offer this, because when they announced the new road bridge, or the new road was going to be closed for the work at Tower Hill, they provided routing directions in a workshop and on paper that directed people who were using New Road to access things east of the Canal side of the Tower Hill project. If they came in New Road, they should turn right on Old Orchard, turn left on Savannah, come down to Front Street and turn left on Front Street, proceed up Front Street to New Road and turn left. They specifically excluded 4th Street.
Good.
So they already are sensitive to the idea of trying to keep traffic on state-owned roads. That doesn't mean we can't reinforce it in some way, but in the direction that they put out to the public about the detour, it contained that direction.
Right, and I thank you for speaking to that, Mayor. The fact is that they had the workshops, they might have posted on their website, et cetera. The fact is that they did not also support that action with signs on New Road at the time that this construction activity was going on. So in fact, I witnessed trucks coming from the Lewis Waterfront Preserve community down New Road, turning on 4th Street and driving the length of 4th Street, which is, I believe, a city street, all the way to Savannah Road. So they might, in fact, have clearly identified the route for incoming traffic, but they didn't support it with signs, and there were free agents in the form of truck drivers driving through.
Well, it also doesn't give the chief, if there's no ordinance on our books to have the chief.
He can't enforce anything.
Anyone over, there's nothing to enforce.
There's nothing to enforce.
So I think we could address it, but this is not something,
DelDOT did put up detour signs that directed the people onto state. They don't turn here on 4th
Well,
Street.
their detour signs were woefully inadequate and inaccurate. They
We
would
have
tell
to
them,
work with them. We got to work with them.
I want to work with them, but they've got to be willing and able to respond to emails and phone calls advising them that their signage is inaccurate and not reliable.
Well, I think we, look,
But the critical thing is that we have a safety issue.
No, we do,
And
absolutely. But I think moving forward, we have to, I think Anne Marie and Janelle and others, who liaison with DelDOT, probably are our best, point of contacts there. But I think you raised a very, very important issue, identified a real threat, and it's not going away in this year, next year, or the year after.
Right.
It's gonna be an issue for a while, and I think, we need to get our arms around it and have the, right policy, whether it's, it's 8,500 pounds, whatever the,
It's definitely a weight thing.
We've been hearing from the public on 4th Street, who live on
Yes.
4th Street. That 4th Street has become, and New Road has become a major egress for hospital workers who drive regular cars. And the traffic on 4th Street has definitely picked up.
I got 2 emails as well.
And your
about that.
backyard is on 4th Street, so you see it daily. So I support the idea of, working with DelDOT.
Calls for another circle.
Around it out.
But I think it's a good idea, Tim. It's just a matter of, I think we need to work with DelDOT and make sure.
Oh, and listen, I would certainly expect DelDOT to be a partner in this.
Do you have a motion in mind?
Make a motion.
Would you like to make a motion?
You make a motion.
Boy, I waited, wasn't sure.
She's ready to go.
It's yours.
I was great eloquence out of the mouths of you.
I could try to make a motion. I would instruct the city staff to work with DelDOT in identifying appropriate truck routes and
state roads.
and identifying those by marking areas within the city streets that are off limits to trucks of a certain tonnage. Now, maybe that's why I'm hesitant on because maybe DelDOT has better
DelDOT
knowledge
can
on whether it's
probably help
weight
advise
or
us as to where the weight.
axles.
Right.
Yeah.
And yes, and that's your motion.
It's pretty weak.
No. Well, may I offer an amendment?
And a second for it.
Oh, do I hear a second?
One thing we do need to factor in is, as we mentioned earlier, is enforcement. The chief just raised an interesting issue. Let's say it's 7,000 pounds, 8,500 pounds. How does he know, how do he and his officers know how much it weighs? You can't weigh the vehicle on the spot. And I've seen these signs in other jurisdictions. I know they're out there. I'm just curious, how do you identify?
It's gross weight, they usually do it by
The
gross
registration
weight.
should indicate.
And they figure out the chief, am I mistaken?
Registration of the vehicle.
Right, the registration, and then also the trucks are rated as far as their gross weight carrying capacity, correct?
Right.
So.
Yes, the problem would be full, half full, not full at all, already dumped, and that's where I run into the potential issue.
Right. The other thing.
It can always be done by axle, too.
The registrated, or the registration weight is easy, but other conditions could change.
Okay.
Yeah, it's another good issue to explore.
So we have a motion, correct?
Second.
Do we have a second? Because then I'm.
I second.
You know we got a second.
All right, thank you.
What's the friendly amendment?
The friendly amendment is this. I recognize that we need to show flexibility in this regulation. And what I would also like to include is that at the time that we review and approve projects by our planner and also our building department, that a temporary, if you want to call it, a truck route is established at that time with the developer, so that during the construction, during the period of construction, during the period of development, that the designated route is established, and then at the conclusion of the development, the construction, that truck route is could be eliminated. It's just a suggestion.
Can I suggest that that be a separate motion, because they're kind of different? I like it. I like it, but it's a different topic.
Okay.
And then also, you want to vote on the first one, then?
Those are two different subjects.
So,
We vote on Andrew's motion first.
Yeah, we vote
we have a
on it.
motion and a second without the amendment.
That's correct.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Now you're making a
I'll
separate.
come up with the second one, because it's different.
I mean, I'll say. Yeah, why don't you repeat it then?
Okay.
I wrote it down.
Okay.
Do you- I have it that Mr. Ritzert moves to designate truck routes for development projects at the time of their approval.
Correct.
That's good.
Yeah, that.
I would say, rather than truck routes, I would say construction vehicles.
Construction vehicle routes.
Right. And, right.
Yeah, that
And
says it all.
And it would run for the term of activity, the development and construction. Right.
That makes sense.
I'll make a motion for that.
Second.
Yeah, I second, anybody
Okay, so
second?
we've got second splice here. So.
Yeah.
I think we're on board.
Okay, so, all right, we have a motion and a second, which Anne Marie's got recorded. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Anything else to bring forward here tonight?
Let's do that
End
one.
of the agenda. Okay. Hearing none, I don't know how many people hung in there on Zoom, but we have two people in the audience. Thank you both for hanging in there.
All right, so moved.
And
We have 11 on
we still have 11 on Zoom. Well, good. Thank you, all of you on Zoom. And since we still have 11 people and 2 people in the room, we wish you all a very happy holiday season. And we'll see you all in early January when we reconvene with another council meeting, if we don't see you before. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Best wishes.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Oh, I thought you did. Okay, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are officially adjourned, folks. All for 22, all for 21.
Excellent. Oh, I can't even stand up. Oh, man. What if I'm starving and I'm stiff?
Starving and stiff. Well, that's good. Are you into alliteration there?
Goodness.
Have a good night.
Thank you. That all the best.
Thank you very much.
It's not much of a night left.
You guys